Listen closely. At some point in your dating life, you're going to pull back, not as a tactic, not as a game, but because something inside you genuinely shifts. Maybe you noticed a lack of effort. Maybe the connection stopped growing. Maybe you simply stopped feeling the same pull. When that happens, something very specific occurs on the other side. A woman feels that change long before you announce it, explain it, or even fully understand it yourself. Most men misunderstand this moment. They assume losing interest makes them invisible. They assume silence equals indifference. They assume pulling back ends the story. In reality, that shift in your energy often becomes the most emotionally loud moment in the entire dynamic. Not because of what you say, but because of what disappears. Modern dating runs on attention, emotional feedback, and consistency. When one of those drops, the balance changes. When you drop it, her internal radar switches on. She begins reviewing interactions, reinterpreting past moments, and questioning her position. This is not about drama, it's about awareness. Humans are wired to notice loss more intensely than presence. You don't need tricks. You don't need rehearsed lines. You don't need to manufacture mystery. This is about understanding what happens when a woman realizes the man who once leaned in no longer does. When your response is slow, when your tone flattens, when your curiosity fades, when you stop chasing clarity and start choosing peace. This topic matters because many men sabotage themselves at this exact stage. They either rush to explain, overcorrect with attention, or disappear without understanding the emotional consequences. Others misread her reactions and assume attraction returned when it hasn't. If you don't understand the psychology here, you'll misplay the moment, either losing respect or staying longer than you should. In this video, we're going to break down how women typically react when they sense your interest fading. Not hypothetically, not based on wishful thinking, based on behavior patterns that repeat across modern dating culture. You'll learn how her communication changes, how her emotions reorganize, and how her perception of you quietly shifts. This isn't about control, it's about clarity. When you understand what your withdrawal triggers, you stop acting confused. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop mistaking temporary reactions for long-term desire. Most importantly, you move with calm instead of anxiety. Stay with me through this entire breakdown. Each section builds on the last. By the end, you'll understand why losing interest often creates more emotional movement. 1. The shift. The first thing that happens when a woman realizes you've lost interest is internal. Long before she reacts outwardly, she feels the shift. Your energy changes. Your responses shorten. Your presence becomes lighter. You're no longer leaning forward emotionally, and that absence hits harder than most men expect. Women are highly attuned to patterns, not because they overanalyze everything, but because consistency equals safety. When your behavior breaks its own pattern, it creates uncertainty. You might think you're being subtle. You might think you're just matching effort. To her, it feels like a quiet door closing. At this stage, she doesn't panic. She doesn't accuse. She observes. She replays conversations. She checks timing. She compares how you used to show up versus now. This is where many men misread things. They assume no reaction means no impact. In reality, this is the moment her emotional awareness sharpens. Her curiosity increases. Not curiosity about you as a person, but curiosity about why the shift happened. She asks herself questions she didn't ask before. Did she say something wrong? Did you meet someone else? Did she misjudge her importance to you? The dynamic that once felt stable now feels unresolved. Here's the part most men miss. Your loss of interest doesn't automatically reduce her attraction. It interrupts her emotional certainty. That interruption creates tension. Tension demands resolution, and resolution becomes the focus. She may subtly test you at this stage. A message that hints at closeness, a reference to a shared moment, a light emotional probe to see if you still respond the same way. These are not dramatic moves. They're quiet checks. She's measuring whether the door is actually closing or just temporarily stuck. Your response here matters more than what you say. If you over-explain, you signal instability. If you suddenly flood her with attention, you signal confusion. If you remain calm, steady, and unchanged in your reduced engagement, the message becomes clear without words. Another important shift happens internally for her. Your value recalibrates. When attention is constant, it becomes background noise. When it fades, it becomes noticeable. She starts reassessing what your presence meant and what its absence might mean going forward. This stage is not about winning or losing, it's about positioning. If you stay grounded, she experiences your withdrawal as intentional, not emotional. That distinction is critical. Intentional withdrawal suggests self-respect. Emotional withdrawal suggests resentment. She reacts very differently to each. Many men ruin this moment by acting guilty for losing interest. There is no guilt required. Attraction is not owed. Interest is not a contract. When you allow the shift to exist without apology or performance, you communicate strength without saying a word. This is only the beginning. Once she accepts that the shift is real, her behavior starts to change. That's where things get revealing, and that's what we'll cover next. 2. Increased effort. Once a woman accepts that your interest has genuinely dropped, her behavior moves from observation to action. This is where effort increases, not in an obvious, desperate way, but in subtle, strategic adjustments. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't label it. She simply starts doing more. You might notice her initiating conversations more often. Messages arrive sooner. Her tone becomes warmer. She laughs a little harder. She asks more questions about your day, your plans, your thoughts. These aren't random changes. They're responses to perceived loss. When something valuable feels like it's slipping, effort naturally rises. This stage confuses a lot of men. They assume her increased attention means attraction has grown. In reality, it means concern has grown. There's a difference. Attraction feels relaxed. Concern feels alert. If you don't understand this distinction, you'll misinterpret the entire dynamic. She may also try to remind you of what the connection used to feel like, bringing up shared jokes, referencing early moments, recreating situations where you once seemed more engaged. This is her way of restoring familiarity. Familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Another common behavior here is emotional availability. She opens up more. She shares something personal. She shows vulnerability that wasn't present before. This isn't manipulation. It's a natural attempt to deepen the bond to stabilize it. Emotional closeness is her lever. Pay attention to timing. This increased effort usually appears after your pullback has stayed consistent. If you waver, pull back one day and lean in the next. You stretch this phase longer. That creates confusion rather than clarity. Consistency keeps the dynamic honest. Here's where many men sabotage themselves. They feel flattered. They re-engage fully. They reward the increased effort with renewed attention. That teaches her that effort only needs to increase when she feels you slipping. It also resets the cycle. You end up back where you started, only now with more emotional friction. Staying steady does not mean being cold. It means matching reality. If your interest has dropped, your behavior should reflect that calmly. No punishment, no explanations, just alignment. This is what keeps respect intact. She may also test boundaries at this point, asking to see you more often, suggesting plans sooner, wanting reassurance without asking for it directly. These tests reveal whether your center has shifted or whether you're easily pulled off balance. If you give reassurance you don't feel, she senses it. Women read emotional congruence very well. Words that don't match energy create distrust. Silence with consistency creates clarity. One key insight here, her increased effort is not guaranteed to last. It's fueled by uncertainty. Once certainty returns, either through your renewed interest or your continued withdrawal, this phase resolves. That's why men who chase this spike in attention often feel confused when it disappears again. The goal here isn't to win her back or push her away, it's to stay honest with yourself. When you do, her behavior will eventually align with that reality. Next, we'll talk about what happens when increased effort doesn't change your position and how her emotional tone begins to shift. 3. Emotional swings. When increased effort doesn't restore the dynamic, a woman's emotional tone begins to change. This is where many men get thrown off. The warmth becomes inconsistent. The energy fluctuates. One moment she's engaged, the next she's distant. These swings aren't random. They're reactions to unresolved uncertainty. At this stage, she's no longer trying to fix things quietly. She's processing the possibility that the connection may not return to what it was. That realization creates internal tension. When tension has no outlet, It leaks through mood. You might notice shorter replies followed by sudden enthusiasm, interest followed by indifference, playfulness followed by silence. This is her recalibrating emotionally while still staying connected. She hasn't let go yet, but she's preparing for that outcome. Some men interpret these swings as drama or immaturity. That's a mistake. What you're seeing is emotional adjustment in real time. She's testing whether pulling away herself will pull you back. This is not conscious manipulation. It's instinctive balance seeking. This is also where passive expressions may appear. A comment about how people change, a joke about being low priority, a vague statement about feeling unsure. These aren't accusations. They're emotional probes. She's checking whether you'll step in to stabilize things. How you respond here defines the rest of the interaction. If you react defensively, you confirm emotional instability. If you rush to reassure, you reverse your position. If you ignore everything completely, you appear detached. The strongest response is calm neutrality. Acknowledgement without emotional investment. Men often underestimate how powerful emotional steadiness is here. When you remain unchanged, her swings gradually lose momentum. She either adapts to the new reality or disengages. Both outcomes bring clarity. Another shift happens internally for her during this phase. She starts separating her self-worth from the connection. Early on, your loss of interest feels personal. Now, she's reframing. She reminds herself of options. She focuses on other areas of her life. This is the beginning of emotional independence returning. This phase can feel uncomfortable for men because attention becomes unpredictable. You may receive a heartfelt message one day and nothing the next. The temptation is to chase consistency. Resist that urge. Consistency must come from your side first. If you try to smooth out every emotional swing, you take responsibility for feelings that aren't yours to manage. That drains respect over time. Let her process without interference. It's also important to understand that emotional swings don't mean attraction has vanished. They mean attachment is loosening. Attraction can exist without attachment. Once attachment weakens, behavior becomes less controlled by fear of loss. Some women will exit quietly at this stage. Others linger longer. The difference often depends on how clear your withdrawal has been. Clear signals shorten emotional turbulence. Mixed signals extend it. This is the turning point. After this phase, her reaction moves from emotional to practical. She starts making decisions instead of feeling them. That's what we'll cover next. How her actions change when emotions settle and reality sets in. 4. Reclaiming control. When the emotional swings fade, something important happens. She shifts from reacting to acting. This is the stage where a woman begins reclaiming control of the situation. Not control over you, but control over herself. Her behavior becomes more deliberate, more measured, and less emotionally reactive. You may notice her pulling back slightly, not disappearing, but creating space. Messages become less frequent. She stops initiating as much. The warmth cools. This isn't punishment, it's self-protection. She's adjusting to the reality that your interest has changed and she needs to regain balance. At this point, many men assume they've been forgotten. That's rarely the case. You're still very much in her awareness. The difference is that she's no longer chasing clarity. She's choosing composure. This is also where she may subtly reassert independence, spending more time with friends, posting more, engaging in other areas of her life. These actions aren't meant for you specifically, even if you notice them. They're meant to restore her sense of autonomy. If she does reach out during this phase, it's often neutral, practical, light. She's testing whether interaction can exist without emotional strain. If it can, the connection stabilizes at a lower intensity. If it can't, distance increases naturally. This is a critical moment for you. If you suddenly re-engage here, it sends a confusing message. You appear reactive rather than grounded. It suggests your withdrawal wasn't intentional, just emotional. That weakens the respect you've built through consistency. Remaining steady doesn't mean shutting down communication. It means matching the new tone, calm, polite, unforced. This reinforces that your shift came from clarity, not conflict. Another internal change happens for her now, narrative revision. She begins rewriting the story of the connection in her mind. Instead of wondering what went wrong, she reframes it as something that ran its course. This reframing reduces emotional charge. When women reach this stage, the outcome becomes predictable. Either she accepts the new dynamic and keeps you in her life at a distance, or she gradually disengages. What she no longer does is chase validation. This is often the point where men feel a strange sense of loss. The attention is gone. The tension is gone. The energy has leveled out. That's when some men try to reignite things, not because interest returned, but because validation disappeared. Resist that impulse. Acting from loss of attention leads to decisions you don't respect later. If your interest genuinely dropped, honor that truth. It's important to understand that reclaiming control is healthy. It means she's emotionally mature enough to adjust rather than cling. Respect this phase. Don't interfere with it. When handled cleanly, this stage closes the chapter without resentment. When handled poorly, it creates cycles of on and off engagement that drain both sides. There's one more reaction that often surprises men. Sometimes, after full detachment begins, something unexpected happens. That's what we'll break down next. 5. Sudden distance. After she reclaims emotional control, the next reaction can feel abrupt. The distance becomes noticeable. Communication slows dramatically or stops altogether. Plans fade. Presence disappears. To many men, this feels sudden. In reality, it's the final stage of acceptance. This isn't an emotional move, it's a practical one. Once she's processed the loss of your interest and restored her internal balance, distance becomes the cleanest option. Staying connected without mutual engagement no longer serves her. At this point, she's no longer waiting for signals. She's no longer testing. She's no longer wondering. She's decided that the connection no longer aligns with her emotional needs. That decision brings calm. Men often misinterpret this distance as indifference. It's not. It's resolution. Indifference comes later. Distance is a boundary. You might notice she unfollows, mutes, or stops viewing your activity. These actions aren't dramatic statements. They're steps to reduce emotional noise. Out of sight helps her move forward without reopening questions. This phase is where ego gets involved for many men. They feel replaced, forgotten, overlooked. That reaction has nothing to do with her behavior and everything to do with sudden absence of attention. When attention disappears, it exposes how much you were receiving without realizing it. Here's the critical mistake men make here: reaching out to reestablish contact without renewed intent. A casual message, a check-in, a nostalgic reference. This interrupts her closure and reopens emotional threads she worked to tie off. It rarely leads to something better. If you do reach out at this stage, it should only be because your interest genuinely returned and you're prepared to act consistently. Anything less creates confusion and erodes trust. Another key point: sudden distance doesn't mean attraction was fake. It means attachment has been released. Attraction can exist quietly without expression. Attachment drives action. Once attachment dissolves, behavior simplifies. Some women will leave the door slightly open. Others close it completely. The difference often depends on how clean your withdrawal was earlier. Clear signals lead to cleaner endings. This stage teaches an important lesson: how you exit matters more than how you enter. A calm, respectful withdrawal allows both sides to move forward without resentment. For men, this is an opportunity to build emotional discipline, to sit with quiet without chasing stimulation, to recognize that not every connection needs to be maintained. Interestingly, there's one last reaction that can occur much later, after distance has settled. It catches many men off guard because it feels like a return. It's not what most think it is. 6. Delayed curiosity. After distance has been established and emotions have settled, something subtle can resurface. Time passes. Silence becomes normal. The emotional charge fades. That's when delayed curiosity can appear. This reaction often surprises men because it arrives when they've already accepted the ending. She may reach out casually. A simple message, a neutral question, a comment that feels light and unweighted. There's no urgency in it, no emotional pull. That's the key difference. This is not a return of attachment, it's curiosity without risk. Once emotional investment is gone, curiosity feels safe. She's no longer seeking reassurance or clarity, she's checking in from a place of neutrality. Men often misread this as renewed interest. They assume distance created desire. They assume absence worked. That assumption leads to overinvestment. When you respond with intensity, you reveal a mismatch in emotional position. Delayed curiosity exists because unresolved narratives linger quietly. Humans like closure that feels complete. A calm check-in allows her to confirm that the connection is truly neutral now. Your response here matters. If you reply casually, without leaning forward emotionally, the interaction stays light. If you suddenly re-engage deeply, you reopen a dynamic she already closed. Another reason this happens is comparison. After time away, she may compare new interactions to old ones. Not with longing, but with reference. You represent familiarity. Familiarity feels stable when contrasted with novelty. This doesn't mean you were irreplaceable, it means you were real. Real connections leave impressions even after they end. Men who stay grounded during delayed curiosity maintain respect. Men who chase validation lose it quickly. The tone you set determines whether the interaction remains brief or becomes awkward. There's also an important internal shift for you here. When curiosity appears and you don't need it, you realize you've regained emotional independence. That's growth. That's stability. Some men feel tempted to reassert themselves here, to prove value, to rekindle energy. Ask yourself why. If interest hasn't returned organically, don't manufacture it. Delayed curiosity is not a signal. It's an echo. Echoes don't require responses that restart the sound. If you choose to engage, keep it honest and light. If you choose not to, that's also valid. Silence here is not avoidance. It's completion. This phase reinforces a core principle. Clarity creates calm on both sides. When you move with intention, reactions lose power over you. There's one final layer to understand. The lasting impact your loss of interest leaves on how she remembers you. 7. Lasting impression. The final reaction isn't something you see in real time. It's how she remembers you once everything settles. This matters more than most men realize. Memory shapes meaning. Meaning shapes reputation. And reputation follows you further than any single interaction. When a woman looks back on a man who lost interest, she doesn't focus on the exact moment it happened. She focuses on how he handled it. Was he steady or erratic? Calm or reactive? Clear or confusing? Those traits define the lasting impression. If you withdrew without hostility, without guilt, and without performance, you're remembered as grounded. That carries weight. Even if the connection ended, respect often remains. Respect is what separates closure from resentment. If you over-explained, disappeared abruptly, or reappeared inconsistently, the memory becomes blurred. Confusion replaces clarity. That confusion tends to color how she speaks about the experience internally and externally. Women remember emotional patterns more than events. They remember how it felt to interact with you near the end. Peaceful endings create neutral or positive memories. Chaotic endings create caution. Another important factor is dignity. When you don't chase after losing interest, you demonstrate self-trust. That leaves a strong imprint. It communicates that your attention is intentional, not compulsive. This impression also affects future interactions. If you ever cross paths again, the tone is set. A clean ending allows for mutual respect. A messy one creates tension or avoidance. For men, this is where emotional maturity shows. Anyone can be confident when things are going well. How you act when interest fades reveals who you are. There's also an internal benefit. Handling this well reinforces your own standards. You learn that you can disengage without drama. You don't need justification. You don't need approval. That lesson carries into future relationships. You become less reactive, more selective, more at ease with your own decisions. The modern dating world is crowded with noise. Attention is cheap. Consistency is rare. Calm detachment stands out. When a woman remembers a man who stepped back cleanly, she often associates him with stability. Even if she didn't get what she wanted, she respects how it ended. This doesn't mean you aim to be remembered. It means you aim to act in a way you respect. Memory takes care of itself. In the end, losing interest isn't a failure, it's information. Acting on that information with composure defines your character. That brings us to the final takeaway: how to internalize everything we've covered and move forward without second-guessing yourself. When your interest fades, the most powerful move is calm alignment. No explanations, no chasing reactions, no retreat fueled by emotion. A woman responds not to the loss itself, but to how grounded you remain while it happens. Every reaction you've seen follows one truth: clarity creates resolution. When you honor your internal shift without guilt or performance, you protect your self-respect and leave no emotional mess behind. Modern dating rewards men who move with intention, not urgency. Stay steady. Let reactions pass. What remains is peace, and that's the real win.